All right, let's dive into a truly dark and complex chapter in American history, the Atlanta child murders.
A case that, frankly, still haunts Atlanta even today.
Between 1979 and 81, over 20 black kids, teenagers, even young adults murdered.
And the scariest part, even with Wayne Williams convicted for two adults and linked to many of the child murders, so many questions linger. Decades later, it's a case that just won't go away.
It sticks with you, doesn't it? The mystery, the tragedy, it all just hangs there. Let's go back, summer of 79, when this nightmare begins. Two teenagers vanish, Edward Smith and Alfred Evans.
They're found, but at first nobody connects them, like the city's walking blindly into this horror.
And then more disappearances. A chilling pattern, like a blueprint of terror.
All black victims, 7 to 17 years old, snatched from ordinary life, walking, playing. Their bodies turned up in woods, by rivers, many strangled.
Imagine the fear that gripped Atlanta, especially in the black community. Parents terrified to let their kids out of sight.
And this fear, it was magnified by what was happening in the city. Atlanta had just elected its first black mayor, Maynard Jackson. Tensions were high between the black community and the police. It was a tinderbox, waiting to ignite.
And to make things worse, the police. They seemed slow to react, especially in the early days.
Many believed if those victims had been white, from richer neighborhoods, the response would have been totally different, faster, bigger.
Tragically, this case exposed just how divided the city was along racial and economic lines.
The Atlanta child murders became about more than just those individual tragedies. They became a symbol of a broken system.
Disappearances continued, the murders continued. Police felt the pressure. Curfews, flyers, nothing seemed to work. They couldn't find whoever was doing this.
Yeah.
And that's when the FBI stepped in.
This wasn't just an Atlanta problem anymore. It was national news. The FBI had resources the local police could only dream of. Behavioral analysts, top-notch forensics. It was a serious escalation.
You know, it's strange to think. This case, in a way, pushed law enforcement to get better. Profiling was brand new back then.
You're right, a turning point. The FBI, they thought it was a serial killer. Someone targeting black kids, driven by prejudice or maybe some deep psychological thing.
But even with the FBI involved, it took 2 more agonizing years. And then, a possible break. From a place that had become a symbol of this whole nightmare, the Chattahoochee River.
The Chattahoochee should be peaceful, but in this case, it was terrifying. That's where a lot of the victims were found.
In May of 81, police near the river hear a splash. They stop a car. Wayne Williams, local music promoter, photographer.
And here's the thing, Williams worked with young people, talented kids, adds a whole other dimension to this.
The case takes a sharp turn. Police search his car, his home, and they find fibers. They match fibers found on some of the victims.
Those fibers, crucial, yes, but also controversial. Forensic science wasn't what it is today. Fibers could link things, but it wasn't a slam dunk.
Almost ironic. This horrifying case showed the limits of what forensics could do. But in doing so, it probably pushed the science forward.
Absolutely. The Atlanta child murders forced a reckoning. Stricter standards for evidence, how it's analyzed, presented in court. The victims, in a way, they made forensics better for everyone.
A bittersweet legacy. But it's important to remember, Williams was never actually tried, never convicted for any of the child murders.
Right, he was convicted for killing 2 adults, Jimmy Ray Payne and Nathaniel Cater. The prosecution used the fibers to try to connect him to 10 other kids, saying it was a pattern.
That trial, can you imagine the pressure, the grief, the families, the prosecution needing to get justice?
It was huge. Media everywhere. The defense argued those fibers weren't specific enough to say it was Williams, for sure. And through it all, Williams said he was innocent, never changed his story.
And after he was convicted, doubts remained. Many in the black community, even some outside it, felt like real justice hadn't been served.
It just felt unfinished, like maybe focusing so hard on Wayne Williams meant they missed something or someone else. People wanted answers. They wanted someone to blame, so maybe other leads weren't followed up enough.
Like a puzzle, but you're missing pieces. You've got the conviction, but it doesn't fit right. It leaves you wondering, what else is there?
That's what kept the other theories alive. Some of them really disturbing, like the one about the KKK.
KKK, I'd heard that, but never looked into it too much. That's scary.
It is. Atlanta, it had this long history of racial tension. Some people thought these murders, it was all part of something bigger, organized, to terrorize the black community.
And wouldn't that explain why the police were so slow at the beginning? If there was some bias, even subconscious, not wanting to investigate crimes against black kids, that'd give a group like the Klan a chance.
Hard to say for sure, but it's possible. And some of the victims were found in areas where the Klan was known to be strong. It's a reminder of how prejudice, hate, it can hide in plain sight.
Makes you wonder, maybe focusing on Williams, a black man, was easier for some people to accept than a white supremacist group. Disturbing thought. But it shows how complicated race and justice are in this case.
We have to think about those things because they remind us that justice isn't always simple. It's not just yes or no. There's a lot in between. And in this case, that in between is tied up with the racial problems Atlanta had back then.
This case is like holding up a mirror to the city, maybe even the whole country, showing all the racial tension, the inequality.
Exactly. And that's why it still matters today. Makes us face some uncomfortable truths about where we've been and where we are now.
So there's the KKK theory.
Mm-hmm.
But I also remember hearing maybe it wasn't just one killer. What if there were more working on their own? Maybe even copycats.
That stuck around too, and it makes sense. The victims, they weren't all the same age. And how they were killed, it wasn't always the same. Could be multiple people with different reasons, different ways in doing things.
That'd make things hard for the investigators.
Yeah.
Trying to catch not just one person, but a bunch of them. Logistically, that's a nightmare.
It would be. And then you add in all the public pressure, the politicians wanting it solved fast. It's easy to see why they'd focus on one suspect, even if the evidence wasn't perfect.
Makes you think. In investigations, sometimes wanting an answer so badly, it can blind you.
It happens, especially with crimes this awful, everyone demanding answers.
But whether Williams was alone or with others, there's still the question, was he really the only one who did all the murders they say he did? Something just feels off.
Good point. Even if Williams was involved, doesn't mean he did it all. Someone else might have been there too, helping, and maybe they were never looked at properly.
Like peeling back layers, the more you find out, the more questions pop up. And with each question, the case gets more tangled, more interesting.
That's what makes a good mystery. No easy answers. It makes you think hard, question everything.
And for years, that's all it was. Unanswered questions, pain for the families, for the whole community. But then in 2019, a little bit of hope.
Yeah, they reopened the case. And it wasn't just for show. DNA tech had come a long way, especially genetic genealogy. It's been amazing for solving old cases, giving investigators new ways to look at old evidence, maybe find new leads.
Like a second chance. But I bet looking at evidence that old, it's got to be tough.
Definitely. That evidence they didn't handle it the way we do now could be contaminated, might have broken down, even lost some of it.
So even with fancy tech, no guarantees, huh?
Nope. It's slow, careful work. But even if we don't get all the answers, reopening the case means something. Atlanta, maybe the whole country, is admitting there's still pain, and it needs a better investigation.
And it shows how strong the victims' families are. They never gave up, always pushing for the truth. Pretty inspiring.
Shows that sometimes justice takes time. You need to be stubborn, dedicated, and you need the science to catch up. But looking for the truth, no matter how long it takes, it matters.
But even if they find new evidence, you won't take away the damage this did, especially for the families who lost people they loved.
That's true. Those scars, they're deep. Parents living in fear, black kids in Atlanta, their childhoods changed forever. People lost trust in the police. Those things don't just go away.
The Atlanta child murders, it wasn't just about the victims. It showed how vulnerable certain communities are, the unfairness that makes them targets.
And those issues, they're still here. That's why this case still has power. Reminds us we've got a long way to go to make things fair for everyone.
Makes you think. Yeah. But it's also a push to do something. We can't just forget these tragedies. We have to learn from them, work to stop them from happening again. That's what we owe to the victims, to their families.
Absolutely. Their stories need to be told, their lives remembered, and what they went through, it should make us want to change things for the better.
You know, talking about this, it hits me that the Atlanta child murders, it wasn't just about the police changing or forensics. The media had to change too.
Yeah, that's true. They had to look in the mirror, see how they were failing, how they weren't covering crime the right way, especially when it was black children.
It was like the whole country was forced to see something that had always been there, but they ignored it. Before Atlanta, missing black kids, murdered black kids, it didn't make the news the same way as when white kids were the victims.
Right. Back then, media was different. No 24-hour news, no internet. But this case, it was so big, so horrible, it broke through all that. Everyone had to pay attention.
And that coverage, even though people said it was too sensational, too much, it pushed the investigation, kept the heat on the authorities to find answers, to get someone.
It was a two-way street. Media brought attention, kept it in the public eye, yeah. But it could also hurt, traumatize the community even more if they weren't careful, if they got things wrong.
Tough line to walk. Makes you think about what journalists are supposed to do, how they're supposed to act, especially with a case this emotional.
No doubt. The Atlanta child murders, it was a wake-up call for news, made them rethink how they did things, think about the effects of what they were reporting on the people they were covering, do it right, be ethical.
And it's crazy how this case still grabs people all these years later. So many documentaries, books, even movies based on it. It's like a story that won't let go.
There's a reason for that. This case, it's about things everyone deals with. Race, class, justice, loss of innocence, systems failing, people being strong. It makes you think about hard stuff, about ourselves, about society.
And for Atlanta, this isn't just history, it's still raw. There's this push now to build a memorial for the victims so they're never forgotten.
That's powerful, taking something awful and making it a place to remember, to think, to heal. Not just for the victims, but to show we still need to fix the problems that made this happen in the first place.
Looking back, but also moving forward, seeing the mistakes, and trying to build something better, where all kids are safe, all kids matter.
That's what we should aim for. Atlanta, it shows us that justice can be slow. But we can't stop looking for the truth, holding people accountable.
It's been tough talking about this, but important. We went deep into a really dark part of American history. The Atlanta child murders, they show us how messy race and justice can be, but also how strong people could be.
And it reminds us that finding the truth, getting justice, it's on all of us. We have to make a world where stuff like this doesn't happen anymore.
If you want to know more, we've got links in the show notes. And let us know what you think about this case. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep digging.